you ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Hello and welcome to Visiting the Village. My name is Paul Kilduff Taylor, and with me, once and for all, is the definitive Ian Hardingham.
Hello, Mr. Paul Taylor. I have nothing to say apart from video games. Let's go.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
This week's top story is the PS4 Pro. Eurogamer are reporting that some titles are running slower than they are on the base hardware. The PS4 Pro, of course, is intended to be a significant upgrade to the PS4, especially when paired with a 4K display. Is this going to cause some trouble for Sony?
Yeah, we'll see. This is not a great story to come out on release month, week, whatever this is. This is bad. This is going to impact people. The last thing people want is to spend a lot of money and have something be worse, and I'm quite sure that Sony will get this sorted out. But let's have a quick look at why this might be happening. Basically, because the PlayStation Pro is able to render at high resolutions, even if you are using a standard HD screen, the Pro versions of games are often rendering at a high resolution to get a much better form of anti-aliasing, basically, to use super sampling, as the kids call it. The problem being that even though it is really clear in Sony's compliance documentation that this must not be the case, this is just a bit slower than an old PlayStation using old-fashioned anti-aliasing. So that, I think, is why it's happening, and I think that's bad, and I think if that's something that you want to make as a choice to the user, that's cool. But as you and me were discussing earlier, we're much more interested in these new consoles giving us higher frame rates than we are high resolutions.
Yeah, I think some people, particularly kind of TV nerds, I guess you'd call them AV nerds, they want to have their very high resolutions. There's such a competition around resolution. But yeah, certainly for FPSs, you're going to want 60 FPS if you can possibly get it. And I think you, me, and quite a lot of other people are willing to take the hit in terms of trimming some graphics options. Certainly a lot of PC users are. A lot of people really enjoy tuning the options on games to get that consistent 60 FPS or above frame rate sometimes. So this isn't good. It makes me feel like there has been a bit of a mismatch between Sony and what developers are doing here. I think the PS4 Pro is a good product conceptually. I definitely like the idea of it. I like these mid-tier console upgrades. I think it's nice that nobody's trying to sort of reinvent the wheel. But also, you've got to get that communication right. You've got to tell developers, exactly what they've got to give you on the machine. And I think you can get into some problems with that.
Absolutely. I think it's really complicated. Obviously, everyone knows what a new console generation looks like. We've just had the launch of the Xbox One S, which is a pretty traditional mid-season upgrade. A bit more of an upgrade than usual, but it's obviously smaller and quieter and uses less power. And that's what we're used to. I'm reading a bit more about some other PS4 Pro games. And I'm actually really surprised to find that The Last of Us Remastered gives you the choice of a 60 FPS mode and a 30 FPS mode.
Wow, okay.
Now, I have to be honest, I just was surprised to find that. It was the kind of thing that it's so... in console development, locking in what frame rate you're aiming at is such a big deal. I'm a bit surprised they've done that, but it's really, really awesome. I'm not getting a PS4 Pro right now. If all of these games came out and they were offering me the choice of 60 FPS versus 30 FPS on the PS4 Pro, I'd get one straight away. That is an absolutely huge deal breaker for me. I would much rather play at 60 FPS in sub HD resolutions than 30 FPS in any situation. So that's where I get my kicks from. This is not a great headline to come out. I'm sure Microsoft is sort of cackling about this. But I think that they'll get this sorted out really quickly. It's not great that Skyrim is one of the games that's really exhibiting this the worst.
Yeah.
Because Skyrim's in the news a lot. And I'm still kind of bemused about the idea of buying a brand new console to play high-resolution Skyrim. But that's the world we're living in.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I would really love to see graphics options in console games. I don't want PC level graphics options. That doesn't interest me. But some very, very big grained graphics options, like do you want 30 or 60 FPS with a resolution compromise? I would take that all day. I would love to see that. With some things, sometimes, maybe I'd play on the worst FPS. If it was something like Skyrim, the 30 FPS kind of nice graphics version on the PS4, I think is completely fine. Other people would disagree with that. But if I had the option to kind of bump it up sometimes, maybe if I'm in a combat heavy area or something, that would be really amazing. Playing things like Rocket League, it's really bizarre when a match loads and you're in a stadium that lowers the frame rate. I mean, that's completely ridiculous. That's the kind of thing which you want not to happen on a console. And that does still happen with some of the stadiums in that game. And you can't choose which stadium the match is in. Stuff like that, I think, give the user some control to allow them to root it out.
Yeah, I think I'd say that I do have a lot of time for people who say that consoles are about not having that level of control.
Yep.
So what I think I would just limit it to, if I was the platform holder, I'd say to developers, you have to provide, well, if you are going to provide options, you provide them by target frame rate.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to have to choose between having anti-aliasing and having anisotropic filtering, or whatever that's called. I have to say, on the PC, I'm really cool with doing that. I don't really want that on my PlayStation. But I certainly would love to see kind of 30, 40, 50, and 60 FPS modes. And just be able to play around with that. Because that's what's really impacting me more than trying to work out how much I care about a particular jagged edge.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that choice is so big that it would be good to offer it to the user and let the PC user have all the control. I think that should be the maximum, and it's why you have to do your PC version very differently. You really do have to allow that level of control. People on PC have been trying to hammer this home for years and years and years. Big releases, people just like tweaking them. At the end of the day, it's an emotional issue. It's not that they actually necessarily all of them know what Antipodean filtering is. It's because they want the power to do it.
Yeah, being a PC user is very often about being a power user, and I've certainly been used to making those kinds of really low-level decisions with games where I haven't had a PC that's quite powerful enough to run it. I desperately want my 50 frames a second on a new Far Cry or something, and I'm like, turn off shadows! I don't care about complicated shadows. And that's cool, and I like doing that. And it's always interesting to see the differences between the console ecosystem and the PC one, and this is a big one.
All right. Perennial indie complaining man Jeff Vogel has put up a blog post saying that he's no longer supporting Android for Spiderweb Software's games. He kind of sees Android as a bit of an artifact of the 2011-2012 era of indie games. He used a company to port his games to Android, and it didn't go so well. He can't afford to port them himself, and he's no longer supporting Android, even if users complain to him. What do you think about Android and indie games?
Yeah, this is big. Our story reflected this quite a lot, which is that we were given a really fantastic opportunity to get Frozen Synapse on Android. We weren't able to do it ourselves. We still wouldn't be able to do it ourselves. We used this third-party company who did a fine job and then unfortunately went out of business, leaving us in a situation where we weren't in control of what was happening with this version of our game. We ended up taking it off sale a year ago for that reason. So we're really in a very similar situation to Mr. Vogel. And that is an interesting story. But moving forwards, there is just this question about where Android is as a gaming platform, because a lot of people will tell you that free-to-play games make a lot of money on Android. It's certainly not, for me, it's not like Linux, which has always been a pretty small but very passionate gaming base. Android has grown really in huge areas, and is obviously more popular by the day as a phone operating system. But I just don't know if it's down to piracy, I think it is down to piracy, or if it's down to any other factor. But the kind of indie games that we make and a lot of our friends make doesn't tend to make all that much sense on Android.
Yeah, a lot of indie games sort of more recently have struggled on Android, and I do find that weird because it's a platform with such a huge install base. I think piracy is a big part of it. I think maybe much of that install base is sort of not as interested in gaming as maybe iOS, but that's extremely speculative. Mobile is a very technical area. There's lots of people who know a huge amount about it, and we don't. It just seems weird to me, like sort of intuitively, I would always want to keep trying on Android. It's certainly something users still ask for an enormous amount. It tends to be sort of a cadre of very committed existing users who want a secondary platform to play your game on, who will ask you for Android, and then they don't, they're not sort of very numerically significant. But if you can afford to support them, then that is a good thing to do. Supporting your very passionate users who want to play your game more, as long as it's affordable, is a very good thing to do. However, if you are one man, as Jeff Vogel is, then unfortunately it makes commercial sense to cut it. So it does put developers in a very difficult situation. I don't immediately see a solution to it. As you say, I think a huge amount of it is to do with piracy, but there may be something more insidious with the audience base.
Something insidious with the audience. I think we've also at this point got to mention the fact that there are so many more Android handsets. It's much harder to develop for all of them. There are like 1 billion. And even with Apple's recent splurging of models, there are still kind of only 6 that you have to worry about. And they tend to be more locked down with their SDK than Google does. And that's fine. I do think Apple have managed to get their users to be more happy with spending little bits of money on their device than Android users are. And that's cool. That's fine. I'm an Android guy myself. I love Android on my phone. It feels like having a proper operating system that is also really good at being a phone. The other kind of thing that we've seen in the last 5 years is people really deciding what mobile gaming is for, I think. There probably was a time 5 years ago where people were really experimenting to see whether the bigger experiences were going to be a big deal on mobile. And I think we have got past that to people really looking at more streamlined stuff. It needs to have an extremely good interface. Mobile games just tend to be a bit of a different area. We have a game that's been on the back of my mind for a long time that I think is a really good game for all mobile platforms as well as desktop. Whereas, I'm not sure Phones Apps 2 is a great fit for the Android. So it's complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated. One thing that I don't want to happen is if you're an indie developer and you have a game that you think would work really well with the Android audience, I wouldn't want anyone to listen to all this negativity and be like, oh, commercially, it makes no sense. There is still like a good chance that an outlier game on Android could do really well. This is not the situation to me where I think it's like a deadly quagmire that everyone should avoid. Like what was that awful console called? Ouya. It's not Ouya. It's not something that literally nobody should develop for. And we said that.
I want to release a console called Quagmire.
Right. Yes.
That's exactly. A great console name.
Exactly. It's not that where you really need to listen to what people are saying and not do it, but it's just a very difficult one. The developers who kind of go on about having success on mobile, like the developers of The Room, I've always looked at The Room and gone, well, that's just a great mobile game. I think the era where you sort of can speculate on mobile with something is probably gone. But yeah, I want people to come out and prove me wrong. The other thing is, which I meant to mention, is this kind of stealth factor. Like, if people do pirate your game on Android a lot, and it spreads significantly on Android, that's got to be beneficial for your sales overall in the long term on other platforms. People definitely do not just... If your game is a good PC game, it's available on PC, if loads and loads and loads of people are playing it on Android, that will benefit your sales. There's no question.
Yeah, if you're a musician, you want everyone to hear your songs,
even
the people who don't want to pay for them. And the same is basically true of games. You want as many people as possible to be experiencing these things. And if it's not to stop that happening that you don't release on Android, it's just to do with cost, especially of supporting it. Now, Jeff Vogel and us have something else in common. We're not just both angry indie developers from England, but we all... Is he from England?
I don't know.
But we also... We also don't use Unity. So you can use Unity. It makes it a lot easier to release on Android. So that makes it easier as well. So I'm keeping my eye on Android. I think a hidden part of this as well is don't know how to put this mildly, the decline of tablet gaming.
Yeah.
So we've always sort of, you think of Android as being about phones, but Android's a gigantic tablet platform. There are lots of parts of the world, especially places like Brazil, where people do a lot of their hardcore gaming on tablets. And that just seems to have declined a little in the last, again, 5 years or so, which I think has had another negative impact on Android for hardcore games.
Yeah, it's difficult to know. It's very difficult to know sort of exactly why that's happened, and tracing the difference. A lot of it is because a lot of the data for mobile is kind of conflated with tablets, as you say, with phablets and the kind of generalized, insane distribution of stuff on Android. It's very hard to kind of track that. There was a time when tablet gaming looked like being this really, really, really interesting adjunct to basically fairly hardcore, by some definitions, PC gaming.
I just wonder, just to throw a theory out there, the PC is the place where you can play these crazy big grand strategy games, kind of can do anything with interface and give you all of the freedom. I do wonder a little if you're a guy on his iPad or his tablet, you're not going to want to play something that's 75% as deep as a PC experience, if that's what you're looking for. But it's possible that the real full PC experience is just a little bit of a tough sell on the tablet, and you sort of sit there going, yes, I am kind of playing XCOM or something more complicated than that, but it's just a little bit obviously worse experience than playing it on the PC. So you kind of go back to playing it on the PC, or you gravitate towards experiences that work really super well on the tablet. I've thought about this kind of theory a lot in the past, especially as it applies to things like on live. People want to experience everything everywhere, but they also want to experience the stuff they're experiencing at the highest sort of optimality that they can. So they're really excited by the concept of being able to stream their games, and they do that for a little while, and they're like, this is cool, this is 85% as good as playing it on my computer. And people then just want the thing that's 100% as good, and you kind of get these little rises.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely believe in the highest fidelity device available theory, where people will just go for the thing that they can use at that time. So they'll go for the tablet if they can't use their PC, but they're always going to go back to the PC. And that's exactly what OnLive was as well. It's sort of, you didn't, and I think to some extent Steam Controller and Steam streaming and so on, it's a compromise solution that's attractive to people who want that extra step of being able to get access to it. But in reality, it's not ever going to be a mainstay.
Absolutely.
Games Industry Biz had an interesting article about day one sales. The piece by Christopher Dring, and he says, is the industry's obsession with day one coming to an end? He cites some recent games like Rainbow Six Siege and Battlefield 1, which have actually had a sort of slower decline or even an increase in sales sort of at a surprising time, but perhaps didn't have the biggest day one sales. Titanfall 2, of course, being the modern poster child for poor day one sales. Do you think day one matters less now?
I would really love to have had time to spend 3 hours thinking about this, because there are some numbers here. I'm presuming these are correct, but basically, let me just try and get this across the audience reasonably well. Battlefield 3 suffered a 54% drop in sales from week 1 to week 2, and 62% to week 3. Whereas Battlefield 1, which is the sequel to Battlefield 3, well, that's not even true. The sequel to Battlefield 4, their sales have only dropped by 39% week 1 to 2. So that's 54% for Battlefield 3, 39% for Battlefield 1. Similar numbers for Titanfall 2 versus Titanfall 1. And apparently similar for Blops, or does he not have that data? Anyway, so these are significant changes. But these are also all for games that have significantly undersold the thing they're being compared to.
Yeah.
So I basically completely reject the theory of this article. I believe that day one, or certainly week one, is still king, still massively important. I can't tell with the specific data whether people are buying fewer games this fall, and that's actually my go-to my go-to thing on this is that all the people who would impulse buy games on day one, not as many of them are buying games this year. That's what I actually think is going on here. And that's being taken off the week 1 figure, but the week 2 and week 3 figures are still the same kind of people in week 2 and week 3. So it's not that those guys are buying more in week 2, it's that the impulse buyers are buying less in week 1. So that's just kind of what I think's going on, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I could certainly buy that. I mean, also, I think saturation has something to do with this. That would be my sort of hypothesis that I'd want to go in and look at with actual data, which we're not really doing here. We're just doing what we do. That would be my hypothesis. I think if you look at the games that are out right now and the kind of competing styles of game, Battlefield 1, Call of Duty Infinite, Titanfall, Watch Dogs 2, not kind of exactly the same sort of game, but surely kind of similar audience. All of those games have launched really close together. Dishonored 2 as well is going to take some of that interest. It's sort of a generally big PC and console action title. There's been a huge raft of sort of similar titles. I'm really not surprised that people are like really cherry picking what they go for day one, and then kind of sitting back 2 or 3 weeks later and going, hey, well, all of those games came out recently. I can wait for the new things that are coming out, or I can pick up the things that my friends are playing. Rainbow Six Siege is a really interesting case because it needed to develop, get entrenched with its multiplayer community, and it had a lot of stuff missing when it came out. But my God, that game is impressive and interesting. And if you watch it played, it's really like nothing else. So I'm completely unsurprised that's had good later week sales.
Yeah, the Rainbow Six Siege is almost a unicorn at this point.
Yeah.
If you went back to any analyst in the world 2 weeks after its release, they would say this is a failure. And I really think I am just completely confident in saying that genuinely excellent games will end up being will end up selling over a long period of time. In this era where there is such communication between people with YouTube and Twitch streaming, Twitter, etc., even though there's such a huge volume of games, it's still, you know what you're like, you know what I'm like. 1 million games came out in the last year, but we're still only playing a few of them, but a lot. And the same is exactly true of your favourite streamer. Even though they have to cover all these games, when they're tired, but they still want to do a stream, they're going to go back to playing Binding of Isaac, something like that.
Daisy,
so,
yeah.
You bounce back and forth. I think concept is super, super important. Rainbow Six Siege, I think just for whatever reason, didn't nail the concept, which is why it got bad initial sales. But it is genuinely excellent. If you can make a game that's genuinely excellent, I think you will succeed, honestly. Unless you've done something really, really stupid. If you have something which grabs you early and grabs you for a long period of time, you'll be all right. And that kind of gives me some solace in this terrifying, dark period of computer games.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the increased communication is going to allow stuff to stand out. I'm really interested to see what happens with Titanfall 2, like we talked about last week. I feel like still that the kind of chat around that game is at such a high level, almost unprecedented in people recommending it, that it's got to have some kind of bounce back from the dead in future weeks. I really like this article. I think it's nice to see games industry sort of sticking their neck out a bit, doing a bit of analysis. It doesn't pretend to be a very hardcore analytical article. Someone could come in with hardcore analysis and disrupt that. But I like this kind of hypothesizing, and I think it's useful. Also, anything that's going to push publishers into supporting their titles for that little bit longer and kind of trying to make things that resonate for a longer time is good. We're going to talk about Steam discoverability a bit later, and I think there's some positive things in that direction there as well.
Yeah, I'm going to have to pick up Rainbow Six Siege just to finish this segment, because obviously I love Counter-Strike. Rainbow Six Siege is like cool, hipster Counter-Strike with some new features. It's supposed to be excellent. I'm going to have to play it.
Yeah, I want to play it as well. Eurogamer had an interesting article about Battleborn, which I shall now find. Here we are. Battleborn players coming together to help save the game. Members of the Battleborn subreddit have organised a Battleborn Day for tomorrow, 12th of November, in the hope that lapsed players will log back on. Gearbox has taken notice, announcing all heroes will be free to try for the weekend. It's really interesting, a community getting involved to try actively and do something useful to boost the population of a game, as opposed to just complaining about it. Do you think this kind of thing will ever have any impact?
I think it's really nice, really cool, and I don't think it's going to work. I think Battleborn has had its chances. You could say that it just never got quite enough marketing to reach the critical mass. Overwatch probably killed it. But, unlike Rainbow Six Siege, nothing I see from Battleborn smells like a game that's really, really great and different enough. So I think this is really cool. This reminds me of being in the Tribes 2 scene, which was sort of shrinking slowly, like you're standing on an island that's getting flooded. And there'd be like 200 people left, and we all wanted to get more people into the game because we loved it so much. We were convinced that if everyone in the world was forced to play this game, it would be really, really successful still. So I think it's just nice. I'm glad that Battleborn has some people who really love it. And I'm really, really glad that developers have got behind it like this.
Yeah.
But I'm not a guy who plays these kind of games, so I'm not going to get involved in this. But good luck.
This is sad because I think if Battleborn was like a small indie title, this could be really, really great. I've talked to quite a few people who've played Awesome Naught and also met the developers of that game at Dev Days, where they did a really interesting talk. And Awesome Naught is a PC indie game that's been through a lot of different phases. It had a phase early on where quite a lot of the community left, and the developers have responded to stuff really well. They're very into updates, so they release a lot of updates. Some of them paid, some of them free. They're very interactive with their community, and they've gone on and pushed on and done loads and loads of stuff. So I feel with smaller games where you need smaller budgets to do things and they don't cost a huge amount to get servers going, community action like this that's supported by the developers can really work. So it's behavior that I want to encourage and I think is great. And it's really nice to see a game community being proactive instead of saying the developers didn't do marketing and that's why everything is bad. That's never a productive thing for anyone to say, and it basically just annoys the developer. But this isn't going to work in this case, so it's sad.
Yeah, exactly. When talking about the unicorn of Rainbow Six Siege, it was enough to get people to keep playing it and basically to organically grow. If you look at the number of people who've probably tried Battleborn, you're probably looking at a very small percentage who get completely hooked. Now, it's really good that it's possible for some people to get hooked on it, because a lot of games don't have that at all. But those are the kind of numbers you have to look at when working out whether a game can emerge from a bad sales hole to start with. And for me, it doesn't look like that game has it. Because another thing which is sort of implicit in what you were saying about indies, but worth stating, is that these big budget games have had a chance for a lot of people to play them. There are indie games that haven't succeeded simply because they haven't had a wide enough audience. And whereas it's a completely different set of maths with a game that's already had that shot. So, so I think that budget is the most important reason why an indie game can have a massive resurgence from just a few thousand more people playing it. But that's true as well.
All right. Dishonored 2 is having some performance problems on PC. Developers Arcane are investigating. It seems that people with very high-end graphics cards are having very specific problems with certain kinds of anti-aliasing and certain other settings and so on. I wanted to ask you about, to what extent should developers be ensuring with their QA on PC that they don't have these specific graphics card issues?
To every extent. If you're Dishonored 2... you've got to look for this. They've got a mixed rating on Steam, which is insane for a game like Dishonored 2, which I hear is absolutely brilliant and is a really beloved franchise anyway. So just, don't make this mistake. I mean, the list of mistakes that you shouldn't make when making a game, it's like 3,000 pages long. But it's hard enough to make a successful game when you don't make any of them, and at least that is a list that you can follow. And don't make a game that runs slowly on Dude's Titan XX, because he's going to be really angry about that.
Yeah. This is a tough one. I think it's obviously very hard to catch these graphics card specific issues, and some of these look like they might be graphics card specific. But at the same time, you can hire good QA labs will have very extensive PC, setup where they can go and test on loads and loads of different hardware configurations for you. And I feel like, this may not be fair, but I feel like if the problem is this big, then a good testing lab would show it up. if it's everyone with a GTX 1080 or whatever it is who sets this anti-aliasing option, that's the kind of thing that you should be catching. So, as you say, the real casualty here is the great content of the game, which is, going to be problematized somewhat by this kind of Steam review. People are very angry that Steam reviews are being used like this. I feel that Valve are just going to continue to kind of work on how Steam reviews work. They're kind of all in on Steam reviews, so whether you like them or not, they're here to stay. I think Valve will do more work on that, but this is a situation that should not happen.
Here's something I think Steam should look into doing. I think that it'd be really cool if you as a Steam user could get like a permanent 10% off games if you allowed developers through Steam to remote control your computer at a time you weren't using it, to run like a pre-release demo to see how it runs or to diagnose issues. Steam would have to find a way of sandboxing it so that weird developers, it would have to be for super AAA developers. But it just feels like there are ways of automating this if you can get to the hardware. Steam would be a good way of distributing that. So that's my crazy idea for the week.
Yeah, and also you could do that. You wouldn't have to release full game code for people to do that. You could give people a preview build, excuse me, ahead of time and kind of lock that off if you're worried about people leaking it. I think that could be a good idea. Yeah, maybe crowdsource your PC testing to some extent.
Exactly.
Gama Sutra had an interesting little news item that I felt was missed by a lot of people, so I'm going to talk about it now. Steve Moretsky, who is a veteran game designer, as they say, is joining Candy Crush creator King. So Steve Moretsky is actually a legend within the gaming community. He worked on some of the most famous text adventure games of all time, like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Spellcasting, and also on the interactive fiction game, which had a kind of massive impression on me and a lot of other people. A Mind Forever Voyaging was one of his. So I was kind of surprised to see that he is now moving to join Titan of kind of overtly commercial game development, King. What do you make of that?
It's pretty crazy. I guess the only thing that makes this less crazy is that he was working for some weird social games company previously. So I suppose this in some ways, his career is sort of moving in this direction. But in general, I don't know what King are doing. I mean, maybe they think that text adventures are the new free-to-play coin things. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know what he's been working on at GSN or whatever this company is called, his previous sort of social game company. But I feel like he's sold out, man. Like, as a Steve Moretsky fan, I doubt he's going to be doing anything as interesting as those Infocom era games anymore. I'd love to see him come back to interactive fiction and do some kind of crazy Her Story type Steam hit interactive fiction game. Wouldn't that be a fitting end to this story?
Yeah, he should definitely be working on something like that. And pretend to King that he's not, that he's working on the next match 3, and then just hack into the system and make everyone's Candy Crush game upgrade to some amazing old school IF. That would be the best thing he could do in life.
That's a wonderful Steve Moretsky fancy. Anyway, Steve Moretsky, if you're listening, we wish you well. And we're long-term fans of your creative output.
Well done, Steve.
If you do want to come back to the light side, just let us know. Right, it's time to talk about Steam's discoverability update now, and I believe it's Christopher Dring again, yes, on GamesIndustry.biz, on fire this week. Christopher Dring with 2 articles on the show talking about discoverability update. He interviewed some awful people like Mike Bithell and Dan Marshall, which I don't recommend doing if you're a journalist. Don't solicit their opinion. We get enough of that on Twitter. But people generally seem to be welcoming the new Discovery update, which is kind of the sequel to the 2014 sort of original Discovery update, which introduced the Discovery queue. There's a lot more opportunities to find existing games based on your current purchases. They seem to be making some quite sort of subtle noises about improved algorithms and so on, recommendations and stuff. What do you make of this?
I'm really glad they're doing it. I think that people spend a lot of time looking at Steam's front end, and I think it's really good for Valve to be spending more of that time advertising different games to you. I think that's really cool. I think that this is a process, and I think they need to go further. I still don't think I've bought a game from my Discovery queue. even though I have been sort of slightly interested in some of them. So I'm not sure if that's Valve's fault, though. Dan Marshall, who is a terrible human being, who shouldn't be quoted in anything, says that discoverability has always been 100% in the hands of developers and publishers. And I guess that's true, but it certainly helps when Steam helps, because Steam knows that there are some weird people in northern Russia who might like your game. Like, Steam are much more likely to be able to get you to your niche if you have a really small niche. So I think it's maybe not beholden on Valve to do this, but I'm certainly extremely glad that they are, and I want them to keep trying. I mean, you know, they have space on their front end where they can put games that are not paying them for advertising, that are not necessarily selling particularly well. Valve definitely, just like Netflix don't just buy things they know that huge numbers of people are going to want to watch. It's about creating a great service and making everyone happy, even the very small percentage who love some very strange things. And that's about advertising the right stuff to them as well. So it is going to be good for Valve. So good, please keep trying.
Dan Marshall says, I've always said I felt Steam's old system of personally curating each and every game was the best solution for gamers, devs, and Steam itself. But it clearly became completely unworkable. I mean, I actually just think that's an interesting statement, because it's clearly the best for devs, you know, kind of like us, basically.
It was the best for me.
Yeah, it's if we could choose a system purely out of self-interest, it would be that system. So let's kind of get that out.
If we could choose, Steam would be able to sell games by Activision and Mode 7 and no one else.
Right, yeah. Was it the best solution for gamers? Was it the best solution for devs who weren't us? I'm gonna say no. I don't think it was. Like, I think to get a game on Steam and have it be successful, you had to really work a kind of very specific type of PR in 2009 to 2012 that a lot of people just physically couldn't do. You know, they might not have access to the journalists to do that kind of work, to get the game noticed by Valve and get it on Steam. And that really wasn't the same as it is now, whereas if you put something out on Steam and it's very, very, very good, and a lot of people want to promote it and give it good reviews, it will rise to the top. So I just don't feel like that system was fair to every developer, much as I would love it to be unfair and weighted in my favour.
I'm just so over the moon that this segment has turned into us criticising Dan Marshall. This is a Good Friday now.
That's your comment. Good. All right. The Mega Drive is being re-released in Brazil. Brazil coming up a lot on the podcast, talking about their predilection for tablet gaming, but also 150,000 units of the Mega Drive are still sold every year in Brazil. So, popular machine tech firm Tectoy has signed a deal to begin manufacturing a new version of the console. Now, people were reporting this. I think they were disappointed because it doesn't have HDMI. It's very interesting because you've got these two different re-releases, the NES Classic, and this couldn't be more different in terms of how they're targeting. What do you make of console re-releases?
How exactly is the Mega Drive selling 150k units a year if it's not being remanufactured?
Who knows?
Is that in second-hand sales?
There's a lot of clones. There's a lot of Mega Drive clones, unofficial Mega Drive clones.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what they're referring to with that opening sentence.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't live in Brazil. In fact, I've never been to Brazil, so I don't know what it's like. I'm kind of surprised by this, but that's cool. I mean, it's going to turn into some incredibly popular device everywhere else as well now. This will be like the really exciting retro gadget. Can I just say, I don't want it to be small. It really turns me off when things are too small. I don't want you to make a smaller Mega Drive. I want it to be the same size as the old Mega Drive, please.
The thing that baffles me about the NES Classic, aside from, it being a kind of completely closed system, you can't add games to it, is the fact that you have to have a wired controller. I don't think they're offering a wireless controller. Now, that to me seems sort of, it's kind of retro too far, to be honest. I would have liked a wireless version of the NES controller. And also,
the wire is probably bigger than the NES Classic just on its own. The NES Classic is tiny.
The NES controller is bad. It's a bad controller. I'm sure it was good at the time. I mean, in fact, no, it wasn't. I was there at the time, and it was bad at the time as well. So I'm not sure
I'm
that
not
I want that to
disagreeing.
come
I was
back.
somewhere nearby at the time, and it definitely wasn't very good.
Yeah, the NES Classic is interesting though. I really like the lineup of games that they have. I believe this Mega Drive is just like, you just have to buy cartridges for it, and it's fairly standard. But I definitely like the NES Classic
I
conceptually.
need more details on this story. Yeah, are they going to start making Mega Drive cartridges again? Is it going to take flash cards? I feel that there's something wrong about this.
Okay, well we can do some live delving because it's originally a Gizmodo article that has been reblogged to some extent by MCV. But I'm trying to find their announcement. I'm chasing down the links. I've got somewhere in Brazilian Portuguese, which is not going to help me. I'm tracking down this 150,000 units of the Mega Drive every year issue. Wow.
Maybe that includes
goes
second-hand sales. I don't know.
I don't know because it's so hard to track those. Sega still moves hundreds of thousands of game systems every year, so they must be manufacturing it, surely. Unless
We're
they
going
have
to
like
have to investigate this over the next week.
unless they have like a massive stockpile.
Let's go to Brazil.
Yeah. No, it seems like they had an existing licensing agreement with Tectoy, and then now they're just sort of renewing it. The reporting on this. The reporting on this is bad. We'll revisit this next week, I think, so that we can be truly well informed. Right, that's the end of that horrific section. Now it's time to sashay onwards. I don't think we have anything in the film and television lounge area because you're just watching Westworld all the time and telling me how good it is.
Westworld's amazing.
That's it. I'm still watching Rick and Morty all the time, and everyone already
I'm
knows.
also watching that. That is also amazing.
Which episode have you reached?
I've just watched the amazing robot woman baby thing.
Oh, the Gazorpazorp?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, well, you're now primed for the best episode of all time, which is coming up next, so you need to watch that. Yes, the Gazorpazorp episode is extremely good. One of the things I really like about that show is when they'll put an enormous amount of effort into some things, and that makes it really hilarious when they put no effort into something else, like the name of Gazorpazorp, which clearly was come up with in about 20 seconds. It's an amazing show. It's really good. I'm sure everyone listening to this knows that. Let's move out of this. We don't have a magic corner this week either, do we?
No.
We don't have the games released in 2006, so I refuse to do that without help. So we're going to move on to the top 10 UK Steam games. And at number 10, it's Rocket League. Now, I'm still playing a lot of Rocket League, and unfortunately, I said this wasn't going to happen, but it has. I've got to the point where I want to get a bit better. So I've started doing the training mode, specifically the aerials training mode, because I'm really, really, really bad at aerials. And it's surprisingly hard just to hit a static ball in weird, different, random positions, which is what the aerials training mode is. So I'm doing a lot of that. I'm hoping to get better. My wife remarked, "Wow, you're a lot better at this game now. When you started, you were really bad yesterday." So I guess that means I'm improving. Number 9 is Transport Fever. A lot of transportation type games going around. Farming Simulator did really well. The new Farming Simulator was good. These simulations,
I'm afraid that Transport Fever is a name too far for me.
That's
too silly.
Number 8 is Squad, which I hadn't heard of before. It's
This is made by the Oh no, I thought it was made by the Oddworld guys. It's made by someone called Offworld.
Is not true. It's kind of come out of ModDB. It's won lots of ModDB awards. It seems to be like the new Armour competitor. It's like an indie Armour competitor,
cool.
Which is an interesting proposition. Very sort of clever thing to have done, and we wish them the best. I don't know why I feel like I want to sort of send my good wishes to developers in the Steam top 10. I always do. Number 7, it's Sid Meier's Civilization 6, which I haven't played yet, and I'm still immersed in Skyrim, so I doubt it's going to happen. Number 6, topical, it's Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Number 5, Planet Coaster Thrill Seeker Edition. I get confused between all of the different theme park type building games at the moment, but Planet Coaster, I believe, is one that is doing great bounds and has like an incredible number of things that you can do if you want to build theme parks. So there you go.
Yes, I think this is the one that's by the Elite guys, I think.
Oh, yes. Those people.
Those people.
What are they called? Frontier? Yes.
Yeah, Frontier. I think it's Frontier.
I always get confused because that's the name of a game that he made. Number 4 is Motorsport Manager. We do have to give our congratulations to Christian, who we actually know, for having the number 4 game on Steam. At one point, Football Manager and Motorsport Manager, two Sega properties, of course, were right next to each other. So well done there.
Well done.
Number 3 is Tyranny, which a lot of people are talking about, and I don't know. It looked a bit Neverwinter-y for me. It's an RPG. It's apparently very good.
Yes.
It's good at letting you misbehave and do horrible things in the game. People like
it's
that.
by
reason.
Obsidian, so
Yes.
it's a big deal. But it feels to me like it's the Icewind Dale to their other games, Baldur's Gate.
Wow. Yes. Make of that what you will. Football Manager 2017 at number 2. Miles got in trouble recently. Miles Jacobson, who owns Sports Interactive, got in trouble because they put Brexit into the game and sort of factored in how that might affect all the players' contracts and everything. And he ended up on the national news talking about Brexit, which, let me tell you, is every games person's PR dream. If your game has some weird controversial thing that's not too bad and it gets you on the national news, that is perfect. So that's probably why it's at number 2. And number 1 is Dishonored 2, which is going to take me ages to play because there's so many games to play already. That's the end of that. We don't have any listener questions this week because I'm lazy and bad. But if you'd like to send a listener question to the show, all you have to do is contact me on Twitter. I'm Mode7Games. And if you keep reminding me about it, I might put it in the show. Have you got anything else to say?
No, I have nothing at all else to say.
That's great. Well, in that case, we'll leave you and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
That's it, children. Time for bed. Don't forget to pay us a visit at www.visitingthevillage.com.